I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're cracking open an important book. It is called Real World 101 Student Guide. It is written by an amazing author. His name is Alcott Germany II. This book promises a dynamic conversation that empowers readers to take control of their lives through education by transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. The author offers invaluable lessons on making even the most unpopular school subjects pivotal tools for success. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at City of Books for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his important book. The links are below this interview. Alcott, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thanks for having me, Logan. This is an exciting experience. And I'm a fan of your work, by the way.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm a fan of your work as well. Real World 101 is a terrific book. It's an important book. What was the inspiration for it? Why did you decide to write it?
It's such a powerful question, Logan, for this reason. When you think about the book itself, I didn't go into it before I wrote it thinking that I was going to write it. It was actually a byproduct of work that I was doing while operating as an engineer. I'm from Detroit, but I took a job in Southwest Georgia. One of the things that I did while down there was a lot of mentorship with young adults. Mm-hmm. And in that space, I was a process engineer working at a manufacturing facility, but in my free time, so to speak, I had a chance to go to a lot of schools. And in that space, I was just invited to really provide career advice, but that was not really the biggest thing that was placed on my heart. What was placed on my heart was having a chance to connect with the future of the world, which are our young adults, which are our young people. And in those discussions where I had classrooms of different grades from various ages, we talked about the content that you find in the book. And so in that, from going from one community center in one school to another, there was a little bit of inspiration that went with the feedback from the students that said, this was such an impactful discussion. Can we hear more? Can we learn more? And so my initial thought was just to come back and do another visit. Right. But then lo and behold, a good friend of mine who was inviting me to these schools, because I wasn't from that community, said, you know what, Alcott, you should probably do something like call this the Real World 101 tour. And in that vein, I decided to do two things. I decided to go back to school for grad school. I'm an undergrad in engineering. I took a master's class in education, specialized in curriculum and instruction. And in that vein, that really inspired me to see the opportunities that were taking place, not just with our young adults still, but also with our school systems. And that in and of itself is what inspired me to start writing. Yeah. And in that space, I actually left the job that I had, went into this instructional design education realm full time. And actually, I think about my cousin all the time. She let me stay with her for a couple of months while I sort of like made my own way. And I wrote the book in her attic. Wow. I was actually in her attic and wrote it there. And so it's a culmination of really what was on my heart for many years and fed to me with purpose from the students I had to engage with during that time I was working in Georgia.
Sounds great. Interesting backstory, that's for sure. Let's crack open that book and
Let's
tell the folks at home what they'll find between the two covers.
Yes, between these two covers, for everyone who takes the time to read it, you're opening yourself up to a dialogue. And so one of the things that I really appreciate and was very intentional about this book was, if you were to write a book report on it, you'd be writing about yourself. You wouldn't be writing about Alcott. You wouldn't be writing about Real World 101. You would really be taking a journey where I'm asking the same questions you've asked yourself and shared some lessons along the way that I also learned while taking that time and taking that journey. And so when you first open the book, and I'm just going to give a preview into a couple of pieces,
Sure.
But in the very first page, there's a dedication. It's a one-liner. And all it says is, this book is dedicated to everyone who taught me to believe in a better day. And it didn't provide a specific name. I wanted to allude to the purpose that was placed on my heart as I was writing it. The next part of the book you're going to read talks about a letter to parents. And because of the target audience, even though the way this was written, it was written in a very timeless language where any age group can pick it up and read it and gain value from it. But it really sets the stage for a parent to pick this book up and understand the ride that they're going to take their young adult on if they decide to, share this book with them. And one of the key questions in that book that I share all the time is, what does success look like to an educated mind? It looks different for everybody and for everybody. And so if you wrote a book report on it, Logan, and I wrote a book report on it, you would have two different answers because the way your mind looks at life is in two different ways, and they're both right. And so in that space is the challenging dialogue. And I'm just going to speak on a little bit of a couple of the headers. Where you'll get into a chapter that talks about what's this for? What now? What next? These are the questions we ask ourselves when we're provided information that we're told we should have to be successful in whatever life we're trying to figure out along the way.
Yeah.
And so between those two covers, you're going down that journey to really understand how education can be used to direct that power of choice that you want to have for yourself. And there's a couple of times where I've had a chance to throw out this thought-provoking and challenging phrase where if you choose not to take advantage of controlling your own life through education, the more parents you elect yourself to have. And that's what we all want. We want that freedom of thought. We want that freedom of independence, but not in a way that's reckless, but in a way that's forward thinking, that in a way that you're actually contributing to society and still bringing your full self. And so without giving too much away, Logan, that's really what you're going to experience between these two covers. That's why it's not a long read, because it's not meant to be a lecture. It's meant to be a dialogue where you're really answering questions through these thought-provoking scenarios that when you walk away from it, you're going to have some thoughts on what you want to do.
Give me one of the thought-provoking scenarios so we can do our own little dialogue here.
Yeah. So one of the things, let's just jump into one of my favorites is in the science category. Now, kids, it's almost hit or miss, right?
Yeah.
You think about, I just can't get this topic. I can't get this science. I can't get this biology thing. There's just so much to memorize. But if you think about it in a different way and say, you know what? When I'm having a conversation with a physician about my parent, about someone I care about, someone I love, and you start to speak through the logic that they're trying to explain to you, you start to look at science just a little differently and say, you know what? I know that this wasn't told for me word to word by my instructor, but I'm following what you're saying. When you think about mathematics is, you think about X, Y, and Z. You think about the equations, the numbers, the different forms of figures. I was a calculus tutor myself.
Wow.
So, and fortunately for me, I've been fortunate enough to, everybody who I tutored in calculus jumped 2 letter grades because I focused more on the fear and building confidence than I did on the nomenclature within the book. But when you start to really think about mathematics and you say, you know what, mathematics is about logic. Mathematics is about making sense of things. Mathematics is about understanding that instead of you being told this is what you need to do to get an A out this class, this is how you can apply mathematics, not just to answer questions about life, but to answer questions about yourself. If you say, hey, I want to be a musician, I don't want to invest in, school or mathematics. You still have to know the business. You still want to be able to allow your voice to reach other people, and you have to understand the logic and the facts and the figures and the market and the industry so you can remain relevant. And so those are the kinds of examples that you'll find in the book where you're like, wow, I just didn't look at it that way. And now you're starting to see how these subjects make sense and are more pertinent to you, which gauges more interest, which gauges more excitement to say, you know what, I'm going to ask my teacher this question now, not because I'm just trying to get an A out the class. I'm trying to make a connection to the content in a way and allows me to do things I want to do when I walk out this class.
Yeah. Well, you make great points. I mean, math, I always struggled with decimals and percentages.
Yep,
I'm not a math genius,
yep,
trust me.
yep.
But once you start earning an income, suddenly you understand
Mm-hmm.
decimals and percentages.
Yeah,
And the same thing is true, like you said, with your parents. You know, you might not have an interest in science, but if someone close to you has a diagnosis that puts them in peril, suddenly, you know, you're on the internet, you're reading it.
yes,
So I guess it begs the question is, we need to find the usefulness of
correct.
information and the
Mm-hmm.
usefulness of our classes,
Mm-hmm.
and have somebody explain to us why this geometry class is important, why this algebra class is important, why this biology class is important, right?
100%, Logan. And
Yeah.
the thing I would want to piggyback on what you just said is it's also okay to have the question,
Mm.
because a lot of times as students, you have the question, you're like, am I fit for this class? Maybe I'm just not cut out. No, you're supposed to have that question.
Mm.
That even went into the design of the book. When you think about the cover of it, that was by design in what where the artists of the cover when we were working together on it. I'm like, think about when you're in the classroom, and now we're in a new digital age now, but
Hmm.
before when you had a notepad and you're just sketching ideas while the teacher's talking,
Right.
because
Exactly. Yeah, doodling like crazy and looking out the window. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
yeah,
It's okay to have that feeling, and there shouldn't come a feeling of guilt with that question. And
yeah,
I think to the point that you were making earlier about the different aspects of the opportunities in education, we were probably talking a little bit offline about that. I think that's the part that we all have to embrace, not just as students, but as instructors and
yeah.
as people who are proponents for education, is that all of the things that we do are to challenge the status quo.
Right,
Everything. That's what
right,
research is all about. And we don't want to wait until we become adults or become much older where there's a whole class of talent that's missing out on that inquisitive benefit in that reward. And
mm,
we want to have those conversations sooner, and we want people to feel okay about it and
right.
have some fun with it, and understand like the more we ask the question, the more answers we'll be able to get and get everybody involved with
Since your book is called Real World 101, I'll ask you this.
it. Mm-hmm.
Do you think courses should be structured more along the lines of the real world? You know, some people say you never learn how to balance a bank account at school. You never learn how to have handle a family budget or a mortgage. And then there are others who believe, and this is the education I had, that we had to
Mm-hmm.
study fine art and foreign languages and literature and science and math and how to get like a Renaissance
Yeah,
education.
I
Whereas taking a lot of classes that to a 18-year-old or a 19-year-old might have seemed very nebulous.
yeah.
Where do you fall on that spectrum?
It's such an awesome question because there are two broad aspects to look at this. The conventional topics of academia, and then like you said, the things we used to learn, which we don't see as much, about how to balance a checkbook and things of that nature.
Right.
I think that there's a responsibility in bringing both of those things together. I
Hmm.
think there has to be a respect for the craft and the journey of coming up with these theories that we
Hmm.
can actually, without going through a long postulate that 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
Like you don't have to go around and be the next Einstein to uncover the next breakthrough. But I
Right.
do think that there is a responsibility that we all need to have in saying, you know what, when you start talking about algebra and you start talking about, biology and chemistry, here are some real world aspects to it. And I'm going to give a little bit away in the book because I feel like it's important given the question you just asked.
Hmm.
One of the biggest things reason why I titled the book the way it is because the whole nomenclature or the whole saying around, I'm trying to prepare you for the real world. Like it
Hmm.
was really a play on those words,
Right.
where really the mindset that we want to provide our students and ourselves is No, it's the real world that's trying to prepare itself for you.
Hmm.
And that really is the message behind this. How do you prepare the real world for what you're about to bring, instead of
Right.
you trying to feel like you got to be a part of what the real world is? You make up the world. And
Hmm.
so that the whole discipline and the respect you need to have for education comes with being able to understand how to apply it and not run from it. And hey, if you don't know, say that too. How often
Right.
that we're teaching our, in corporate, in our corporate lives, where we're saying, look, if you don't know, just say so. Why
Right.
are we saying that when folks are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, but we don't want
Right.
to say that when kids are trying to understand whether or not it's all right to make a mistake? And
Hmm.
so I think there's a responsibility in making certain that we we show the application, because that's what it really matters.
Hmm. Who is your book aimed at? Students, teachers, parents, all of the above?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think for the sake of publishing, I had to choose one, right? It's like, okay, if jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Right.
What's been the privilege in this journey, Logan, is choosing a genre where if you told me which one to choose, I would say young adults.
Hmm.
But when adults started picking it up, I was in a company meeting and I had someone who I didn't even know knew I was an author. There was an adult with his own business had purchased my book and was showing me and was highlighting points from it. And so, which was such a pleasure and a blessing in and of itself. But the lessons are timeless and they were intended to be, and it was written in that way. If I had to say where should you start with it, definitely I wouldn't shy away from any young adult trying to find their way. But I'm telling you, I've been fortunate enough to get the feedback from adults as well, who have taken so much from it and have shared um, so much about it. And if there's a chance, I definitely want to share a story as well. Um,
Please go ahead.
so this book I wrote, the first edition came out 15 years ago.
Hmm.
Shout out to City of Books, who sort of reawakened it.
Hmm.
And in that way, I wrote it in my late 20s, and um, I was an independent author at the time, and I was doing what I can with what I had. And
Right.
I remember I had a couple of sponsors who spoke on the importance of the book. It mattered to them, and so they were buying copies to give out to kids for free, so they didn't have to purchase it. And I was doing a speaking series behind it. Long story short,
Hmm.
I'd already done a couple of speaking series in Detroit, where I'm from,
Hmm.
and I went to the Detroit Public Library. And lo and behold, I was just walking the halls, and a young girl came up to me and hugged me. She had tears in her eyes, and I thought she was in danger. My initial thought was, "Are you okay? Are you in danger?" This had to have been 10 years ago. And in that vein, I look at her, and she looks back up at me, and she says, "Mr. Germany, I just want to thank you for this book because of what it's meant to me." And I remember at that time, I said to myself, if I never sold another book,
Yeah.
this was all worth it.
Yeah.
Um, and so here we are, 10 plus years later,
Hmm.
and it's still having the relevance that it's having. And you mentioned City of Books earlier.
Hmm.
They had a chance to come across the book, saw
Hmm.
that I had the copyright, and reached out to me. Honestly, I didn't even know who they were when they
Right.
called me, and to for them to speak on it in the way that they did, and to put this kind of energy behind it in this partnership, it's been awesome to be a part of. It's been a validation, but I still go back to that little girl
Mm.
who I don't know if I'll ever see her again. I don't know if I'll
Right.
ever meet her again, but every time I think about every book sold, I think back to that moment,
That's awesome.
because it that's what it's about. It's
Yeah.
about getting this message out and helping as many people as we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your career. You mentioned you were in engineering, then you went back
Yeah,
for a master's in education.
yes, sir. So here's it's a long, fun ride. So
Yeah.
graduate from University of Detroit, And I was a chemical engineering undergrad major. And at the
Wow.
time, I went into that major program because I didn't want to be tied to one discipline. So a lot of the themes of the book speak to
Yeah.
the journey in which I had as well. Um, I was in the automotive sector. Was I actually became a chemical engineer so I can get out of that space, really.
Hmm.
And but this was around the time 9/11 hit, so a lot of things. It was really tough to find jobs, especially in the Detroit area at the time. Moved to
Hmm.
Georgia, a place called Albany, Georgia, and I took a job with Procter and Gamble. And during that time, I was a logistics manager, but that's when I decided to go back to grad school,
Hmm.
doing the in speaking at the schools, and I majored in education with a specialty in curriculum and instruction. And then I took the time to start my own instructional design company. I walked
Wonderful.
away from corporate society for a little bit. Developed my first software patent, wrote my first book, um, moved back to Detroit. Things weren't happening in the way I would like, and so I actually went back into practicing consulting. So I actually took a job with BASF initially, and then later with Rocket Company. So currently I'm the VP at Rocket Companies, and overseeing their title and settlement service vendors, with still more to do and more to come. And so I'm
Wonderful.
excited about that future. And so in that entire journey, Logan, that is the true compressed
Yeah,
version
well,
of my
it's an
career.
interesting journey. I was wondering if you had become an educator along the way. You are an educator, obviously, with this book, but I was wondering if you were working in the classroom or as an
Oh,
administrator.
so a lot, and you bring up a great point. So during that time, I did a lot of ad hoc teaching,
Hmm.
especially my specialties are in mathematics and chemistry.
Yeah.
I did a lot of public speaking and mentorship, working with churches, nonprofit organizations. So definitely have a lot of a presence in the Detroit metro area. As you'll see in my About the Author section, I've even done some work in Canada as well, and supporting ministries in different spaces, specifically with young adults. And so I do a lot of also, guest speaking and leadership development discussions. I do a lot with diversity, equity, and inclusion as well,
Hmm.
and sharing stories and journeys and helping people understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion is more than just about um, a culture. It's
Hmm.
about journeys, and
Yeah.
it's about holding ourselves accountable to bias. And
Yeah.
though that is really the essence of DEI. I know that that's a little bit of a touchy topic in
Right.
the current climate. But
Right.
I do a lot of work. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Logan, because I was really thinking resume. But during this entire time, I've really spent a lot of time really focused on doing things from an educator's approach
Yeah.
and being an educator along the way and being a student of other cultures and other spaces along the way as well. But I know we only have so much time, so I
No,
didn't want
you
to
know,
bog
which
down too much.
no, I appreciate you giving me that information. It's all interesting background. Let's talk a little bit about STEM, which I
Yes.
believe is science, technology, engineering, and math, if I do have my acronym right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's talked a lot about the importance of it, that these are where the jobs are. Unfortunately, those are also the courses that kids often hate. You know,
Right.
kids hate
Right.
classes with, unless you're a kid who's a brainiac or
Right.
in that, right?
Yeah.
I was not a brainiac. I was a daydreamer and, found my way later on.
And look at your career. You've been in some of the biggest productions that me and my wife are big fans of. I saw you were in Daredevil, which I remember you in. I also
Yeah.
remember you in The Irishman. I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan of that, as well as Gotham. That was like our weekly thing. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Gotham was one of the last weekly series I think people used to follow before everybody started streaming.
Right.
But yeah, I have been blessed, and I actually found a career in dreaming and
Yes.
imagining and
Yes.
all of that. So I did found my right career. But let's say I wasn't lucky in acting and I wasn't lucky in
Yes.
broadcasting, and I needed to find a role in science, technology, engineering, and math. How do
Yes.
you think we can make these courses more palatable to young people and have
Yes.
them understand the importance of them?
Thank you for asking that question, Logan. I think
Sure.
it's about connecting and not looking and I call this a blessing and also maybe just being open minded because I feel like I was I have the creative brain and the nerdy brain. And then I'll just go as far as saying that where when you think of STEM, STEM has an importance to it, but there's so many different learning styles.
Right.
So yeah, if you just focus on the core science of it, you're going to leave people out.
Right.
And but the understanding that when you talk about new age revolutions in all of these spaces, without the creative aspect of it,
Right.
you lose out on the purpose of it. Think about where we are with AI. We can do all kinds of things with the science of AI, but until you start understanding where to apply it, then it doesn't have its relevance. And so, getting back to your question, I think it's important that we not look at STEM as just the core sciences of those acronyms and start to really see it was a program that I was thinking of, and this is the things I like to do in creating is instead of teaching someone just how to use Photoshop, the software tool, what if we talked about how to use Photoshop to build the next school, to build a school that actually speaks to folks with different learning styles, folks that have different disabilities. That's that the core science doesn't speak to that.
Right.
Creativity and people think to that. And there needs to be a value placed on that as a part of the curriculum.
Right.
And when you do that, that's when you take off. And so I'm a fan of STEM. I'm an avid. That's why in the book I speak on one of the final chapters is about the arts. And it's because I think people think of arts and they just think of paintings and they think
Right.
of sketching. And no, the arts are about opening the doors of their creative thought.
Right.
And when you allow yourself to tap into that and respect those who don't, because some
Right.
people just that's not how they move, and that's
Exactly.
okay. But for the ones who do, just think about how powerful that is when you're able to bring that together and allow people to have a respect for both of those things. I'll give you a story. I was speaking at a career, and there's always a career fair that I'm speaking at for hours when I'm
Mhm.
supposed to only speak there for like 30 minutes. And I love talking to the students with just the experience where they say, you know what, Mr. Germany, I don't want to do mathematics. I just want to be a ball player. I said, okay, let's play with that. Let's have some fun with that. And
Right.
it's a true story. I said, now, you seem like you're a moderate height. So what position do you play? Now he's talking to me. He's like,
Mhm.
point guard. I said, okay. So what is the role of a point guard? He has to be a leader on the floor. He
Mhm.
has to know where the defense is. He has to understand the offense. He has to be the coach on the floor. I said, now help me understand how that's any different than running a business.
Mhm.
You have to understand the market. You have to understand what your clients need. You have to understand how to produce. You have to understand the components that allow you to provide that service. His immediate response, without me even challenging him in any form of fashion where it was combative, he said, you know what, Mr. Germany, I've always wanted to own my own garage. Just like that.
Great. That's awesome.
just,
That's
just like
awesome. You
that was
opened up the gates of his imagination. You opened up a dialogue between you two, and you got him to
right.
express things. And certainly in sports, you need a backup plan.
Yeah, yeah,
That's for sure. You better
yeah,
have one.
right, right.
Before we leave you today, I just want to ask you, any more books coming down the pike? Anything else you're working on, Alcott?
It's Logan. It is a blessing that you asked this question. So lo and behold, I'm working on my next project now. I would love. I have a goal of getting it out sometime later this year, and it's an evolution of this conversation. So, 15 years have passed.
Mhm.
Alcott's learned a lot, and he's met a lot of great people. And so, one of the things that I've really been passionate about, especially in my career, is not just growing myself and being a part of academia, but also developing leaders. And
Mm.
there are intangibles that come with strong leadership. And so that's really the direction that I'm looking to do with this next piece. I'm really hoping that it will be something that readers enjoy as an evolution,
Mm.
something that adult readers will dive right into. But yeah, it's just amazing how all of this has come together because I didn't expect the call from City of Books. And when they called me, I had already made the decision to write the next project, not
Wonderful.
knowing that it had been a 15-year gap.
Right.
I'm a father of three, 4, 6, and 8.
Wow.
So a lot of things have happened, between that time and now. So yes, I am excited. I am working on a new project where the voice of 101 will
Mhm.
be in this book, but it will be an evolution not only of the dialogue, but also of me. And so I'm excited about that and looking forward to that, all the while pushing this book, which, again, thanks to City of Books, I didn't think about these possibilities. We're not only going to offer this book, in the publications that you already spoke on, but they'll also be available in several different languages. So we're going to do
Awesome.
Spanish, German, Japanese, Mandarin, and Arabic. Um,
You got most of the world covered there, that's for sure.
right,
Plus English, of course.
right,
Excellent.
right.
Excellent work. The name of the book is Real World 101 Student Guide by Alcott Germany II. It's an amazing book. It's a dynamic conversation that empowers readers to take control of their lives through education. As you've listened to, Alcott is a man who's got a lot of great knowledge, a lot of great perspective, and a lot of great insight when it comes to learning and education and success. And they all go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other. Alcott, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thanks for having me, Logan. This has been a blast.
I've had a
Appreciate
blast as well. Lots of fun. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.